Hey everybody, welcome to episode 21. First thing I wanted to say is they're cutting the lawn in my apartment complex, and so they'll probably inevitably come by with a leaf blower or a weed whacker, and you'll hear a very loud noise. So just be prepared, that might happen. It's one of the downfalls of living in an apartment. Although the nice thing is I don't have to cut the lawn. Cut a lot of lawns in my life, and I don't have to cut this one. Today I'm going to talk about this book here. Like I said, I don't have a PDF of it, so we're gonna have to flip through the book here. I was gonna scan some pages in, but then I decided, nah, I'll just flip through the book. I mean, it's more me talking about this book than you actually need to see the words. And they have some examples in here, some pictures, but I mean, I guess I'll try to put those up there so you can see those. Before I do that, though, I'm going to take a little pause here just because something came up today on my email. I got an email from Hasbro, and I glossed over it a little bit. It had some new classified figures. Now, I'm pretty much done with classified. The last classified figure I bought was Zorana, which I really like her. She's one of my favorites. And she kind of plays into one of my grievances here with what I found. So again, I saw some of the new classified, like Saboteur. What's his name? Firefly. It looks cool. It looks great. I just don't want to collect classified. I've probably talked about this before, but the main reason is I want vehicles with my action figures, and we're not getting them. And if we are, they're the small vehicles. And if there's anything bigger than, say, motorcycle, it's $350. So I'm not going to fall for that. But anyway, so let me flip you over here and I'll show you what I came across. This is on Hasbro Pulse, but let me go over to Big Bad Toy Store because, of course, Hasbro, who never ceased to annoy me, have a goofy layout on this so you can barely see the pictures very well. So let me flip over to Big Bad Toys. I have it pulled up here. And now here's the thing, and I'll show you here because it's a good example. I want the O-ring figures. They said they were going to do the O-ring figures. Oh, they had one of their Hasbro whatever live events on YouTube, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're going to come out. We're going to do the O-ring figures." Oh, you are? Okay. How are you going to do that? I'm sure you're going to find the most inconvenient and most utter douchebag way to do that and aggravate people like me. And of course they did. They lived up to their whatever, their creed or motto or whatever. Yeah, they came out with them. So first they wanted to do a HasLab Sky Striker for $227. Okay. I didn't buy it. I'm not going to pay $200 and some for the Sky Striker. I would pay $80 for the Sky Striker. I might even pay $100, possibly. Yeah, I'd probably pay $100. Like I said, it was $25. If it was $25 in 1983, 2023, it should cost $100. Okay. I'll buy it. Even if they want to push it, like to 125, 150, I'd probably roll my eyes and probably still not buy it. But 227? And now, then they come out with 2-packs, right? So they instantly sell out of the Snake Eyes Storm Shadow 2-pack, and they're $40. So you're charging $20 for a 3 3/4 inch figure? Okay. Fine. I would be reluctant to pay it, but I would probably pay it if they're, the O-ring figures. Then they proceeded to put out a double pack of the Cobra Soldier and the Cobra Officer at $40. Okay, fine. That one you can get. I haven't bought it. I kind of refuse to now. And then they came out with the Duke Cobra Commander pack, same thing. That's also relatively available. The Duke looks a little weird, but outside of that, I still haven't got it. I want to see where they're going with this. I'm just assuming it's like, let me see. You guys are going to try, I already said this, but you guys are going to try to make this as painful as possible for us true, old school fans to get our old toys back. You're going to make it as painful as possible, make us pay through the nose, and aggravate us every step of the way. I can see it coming. And sure as shit, they delivered. So then they came out with these Transformers. The only way to get Baroness, she is carded in the box, is to buy a Megatron that transforms into a Hiss. Is it cool? Maybe. I might have thought it was cool when I was 10. Do I think it's cool now? It's kind of neat. I don't really like. I don't think like, oh, dude, what would be so cool is if Megatron would totally transform into a Hiss tank. As the corporate, oligarchs are going, yeah, I could see that too. So what they did was I'm ranting, by the way, for this. So they made this thing and they've charged $90 for it. I'm surprised they didn't charge $200 for it. $90? I already have 2 Hisses now. I've got the original black one and I've got a blue one that I really didn't want. So I need to have another Hiss, but this one transforms into Megatron. I didn't buy it. It has gone on sale as low as I think $60 on Amazon. I said if it goes to $50, I may buy it. It hasn't gone to $50 yet. In order to get Baroness, I don't care about the Megatron. I don't even have a Megatron in my Transformers collection. So you would think this would make sense that because the new Megatrons from Siege and whatnot all transform into a tank. You think, oh, if they're going to transform a tank, at least they transform into a tank that I like. Okay, I can buy that. I'm starting to get on board with this, right? And then of course the only way to get Stalker is to buy this guy, which is the Ostriker. Again, why do they like the Ostriker so much? Why can they not make a Vamp? Why do we have to have the Ostriker for the retro figures, and then for this, it's still not a Vamp? Stalker came with the original line, which had the Vamp, right? I don't know why it didn't just come with Clutch. That would make more sense. But apparently, and the same thing with the Cobra Commander. Or the Cobra Hiss Megatron? Jesus, why didn't it come with a Hiss driver? It could still come with Baroness, that and a Hiss driver. As you can see, as I'll show you what came out today, what they announced, they can still do 2 figures in one of these sets. They come out with this. All right, Soundwave. First of all, they stole my idea. Well, actually, I think somebody's probably come with this idea, but I always thought I did a drawing once about 8 years ago of Baroness walking Ravage. I just thought it would look cool because they both have kind of they're similar color scheme to their costume. I like Ravage. I like Baroness. Okay, so like again, I'm not totally scoffing at this idea to mix the Transformers and G.I. Joe. I mean, it makes sense. I love both, and I like Soundwave. It's a terrible looking Soundwave to believe right off the bat, but however, the Soundwave does have to transform into a G.I. Joe vehicle. So their G.I. Joe vehicle they pick is the Thunder Machine. And I'm like, okay, first off, does it come with Thrasher? No. Why? I know why. But anyways, but it comes with, one of my favorites, and the O-ring version, and it comes with Zartan. Now, I haven't read this, and I'm not even going to, but Zartan is not going to, his skin's not going to change color. You know it, because that would cost an extra couple of bucks, and, they don't want to do that. But they'll charge you that premium and not actually deliver on the play feature. But, so they come out with this. Let's see, can we blow these pictures? Okay. I guess they stand behind the thing back here. Okay. I mean, it's decent looking. But again, now it's like, oh, put an extra figure in there. Charge more money. Now it's $100. Is there no end to this? This is not what most people intended or assumed when they said they were going to re-release the O-ring figures. I assumed O-ring figures on cards. Now I know they're going to do, as they did, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow first, right? The problem is, this is what I was talking about earlier, why this doesn't come with Thrasher, is you're taking a toy line that already exists, right? So now you're cherry picking everything that you think is going to sell. So in other words, the toy line can't progress and gain popularity and traction organically like it did the first time. So you're just going to, but the thing is, you're cherry picking stuff out to where things don't logically make sense. I mean, I guess, sure, they're dreadnoughts. It's a dreadnought vehicle, right? Oh, we got to have a girl, and we got to have Zartan. Now, that's fine, because I like the girls in G.I. Joe. I like girls in most of my stuff. And they're going to put these two in there, but they're not going to do a Thrasher. Don't you think it would have made more sense to put Thrasher and Zorana, especially since they had that kind of scene in the movie with the, when she throws him into the water in the movie? That was a pretty funny scene. You think they would have had Thrasher? That would make more sense. So I think I'm done with Hasbro. I've said it a bunch of times, and I'm seriously about 99% sure that I'm done with Hasbro. I'm just sick of all the games. I'm sick of all these money-making schemes to trick us into spending more money than we want to spend. There's no problem with us spending money. If you came out with every single G.I. Joe figure, for the most part, up to 87, I probably would have bought them all on card, right? So there's no problem with getting my money, right? It's just screwing around with me, doing this, these type of goofy stunts because they think it's cool, or the kids might like it. The kids don't want these. Sorry. So that's what I have to say about that. So again, going forward, I'm hesitant to buy anything more from Hasbro. I don't want the 6-inch figures. I don't want these classifieds. And nothing wrong with them. I just don't. For me, I just want, like I said, I always say this again, I want my old toys back. And we're not going to get them. They obviously have the ability to do so, but they're going to just play this cat and mouse, dumb, stupid game all the way along, and I'm never going to have what I want to have, which I'm willing to buy from them anyways, because they want to, they want to play games. So, all right, that's all I'm going to say on that one. We'll let my blood pressure come back down to normal. So let's go back here. As you noticed, my guitar's over there. I moved things around. Got my records going over here. I'm going to get a record, like a record storage and thing to put the turntable and receiver and stuff on over in this corner. So I'm just kind of cleaning out the area and kind of reorganizing things. So that's why, of course, that's why the records are off the wall. So if you notice in this video, like, hey, his guitar's gone. I didn't get rid of it. It's right right here. So I don't know exactly where it's going to go. I'll probably put it next to there anyways. I got to find room to put the speakers and stuff. I moved my toy shelf too. You might notice. I guess I'll move the camera here. I moved my toy shelf against this wall to create more room over there, because I didn't want to put the record player right in front of the, right next to the printer, because if I have this window open and it rains, I don't want rain splashing in. I don't want it to go on my printer either, but I'd rather it go on my printer than ruin my sound system. So, like I said, that's going to all go over there eventually. It's a work in progress. So, move this back there. Okay. The reason I keep looking at my Wacom here is because I'm using it as my second screen. I need to get a second screen over here and run 3 screens, but again, I can't do it all at once, so it's a work in progress. Alright, so back to this book. Alright, so we did cover this one a little bit here. We did cover the how How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. You know, I didn't get super in depth with it, but I kind of glossed. I'll give you the you know, the highlights of it. I'm gonna do the same thing with this. I'm not gonna get super in depth with it. I'm just gonna give you a lot of my highlights. So I acquired this book, not this one specifically. This is, I had to rebuy this, but I acquired this book in 1987, I believe, fall of 1987. I think I was a freshman in high school. It came out in '87, and I want to say I got this at, I know Barnes & Noble wasn't open yet in Rochester. That wasn't a store yet. I think it was like 2 years later they opened up Barnes & Noble. So I want to say that it came out, or I got it at Fireside, because I went to Fireside more. I didn't go to Rochester Book Center as much when we moved to the trailer park, because it was a lot easier just to shoot up Avon and go to, you know, go up to Winchester Mall where Fireside was. They're the same owners as two stores, but I started going over to Fireside more, and I didn't go over to the other one as much anymore. Kittyland kind of at this time was getting kind of weird too. They were like, they had owned a babies, you know, babies with cribs and stuff. They owned one of those stores that was down the way in the complex, and then they ended up merging them and moving them into the corner. They had done that a while. I mean, they did that back in like '83, but they started to slowly move out their toys and stuff, and they started to get less and less action figures. You know, it was still the '80s too, so action figures are still prevalent on the shelves of Toys R Us and other stores, but it seemed like Kittyland was kind of, they're trying to phase out their toys and going strictly baby stuff. So I didn't go there as much either anymore. Again, it was far to go. I was far enough to ride my bike to school or ride over to Joe's Hobby Shop, but I primarily went up to Winchester Mall for books and stuff like that, to Fireside. Trying to think. Yeah, I don't even think the Target Center didn't. Well, Target is there. They didn't build that, I think, for another year, maybe 2 years. But anyways, I got it somewhere. I think it was there, but I'm not 100% certain. And I remember my buddy, my new friend from school, he also got it too. I think either he told me about it or I told him about it. I can't remember how it went. Or we found it together when we were at the store. But we both had this book, you know, right off the bat, it's just like, oh, and then these are hard to come by. There weren't a lot of how to draw comic books, and this one was unique right off the bat because it really didn't go into. It didn't give like this, you know, like Marvel's, you know, the Marvel book, or you know, some other books came out like in the '90s where they tell you know the head, you know, the figures 7, 8 heads high, heroic figures are 9 heads high, blah blah blah. Didn't really tell you much about drawing figures. It's a huge part of comic books, but they even say in this, there's plenty of other books, especially the Bernie Hogarth books on drawing figures and anatomy. Go to those instead. This is about creating comic strips and comic books. So that's good. There's more info. I mean, there's a lot more information on that in here. They give you a brief history of comics. So history of comics section. And it's interesting. At the time, I kind of glossed over it because I didn't really have an appreciation for like anything old, really. I mean, I was a typical kid, you know, teenager. Oh, I don't like anything old. I like everything new. And so they're talking about, you know, like Terry and the Pirates by Walter Caniff and all this stuff that really influenced a lot of the masters of comic book art. I just kind of just looked at it and I don't like it. And, you know, in reading it, you know, I half paid attention to it and I read it. Again, my reading skills sucked. You know, they're not great now either. Yeah, I was, you know, I kind of read through it and just like, all right. And they talk about the newspaper strips. They kind of give, you know, a history. You know, talk about the Dick Tracy comic, Steve Canyon comic. You know, these are all syndicated strips that would be in newspapers or magazines. They touch a little bit on the EC thing. They talk about the underground movement in the 60s with R. Crumb. At the time, I didn't know who that was. And by looking at the art, I didn't see enough of it to really even care about it. I just didn't like this. It was very off-putting to me because it didn't look like comic book work. It looked like weird art, you know. I appreciate all this stuff now, all of it. I mean, I appreciate it. You have to, I guess you have to become a grown up. I mean, you have to have lived a few years and gained experience and really study this stuff over the course of your lifetime to start appreciating things that you just didn't appreciate as a kid. And I think it's just normal. I think just kids do that. They rebel against everything when they're young. They don't listen to their parents. They don't listen to their elders. They don't, they don't have any appreciation for anything that came before them. It's happening today, until they get to a certain age, and then they kind of wake up and they go, oh, yeah, this stuff's really good. It was good for a reason, So, and of course, the older people back then, I don't like this. You call that music? They didn't like any of the new stuff. So it's just it's a constant, classic cliche of life that just happens. So, and then they talk about comics around the world. Now, I didn't really get into like European comics and French comics and stuff yet in '87. It took me a couple of years into high school. I was aware of heavy metal. I was aware that there's something up about it, but I didn't know exactly what was up about it. And I didn't have enough of them at that time to really understand that. And it took, I started to learn that, that was based on a French magazine called Mater as what's his face? Oh God, I can't remember his name is now. There's a video called The Masters of Comic Book Art. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, and I got it on VHS right about this exact same time. And I'm probably going to do a video on that too. I don't own the video. It's readily available on YouTube. You just look it up. You'll see it's got like Cerebus on the cover. The Masters of Comic Book Art. And in fact, the kayfabe guys, Jim Ruck and the other guy, I can't remember what his name is, Ed Piskor, they do a pretty comprehensive analysis of that video, and I agree with most of the things they say about it, so I don't really need to get too in-depth with it, but I would like to make a video for myself just to tell you what that stuff meant to me, because they're telling you what it meant to them. But I got that on VHS probably I think by the next year or the next summer at a convention I ended up getting that videotape, and that's also very pivotal, just like this book at that time, because this is 1987, so as I flip over to this real quick just to show you. Oh God, not those guys. Oh, let's see, where am I? Okay, so I'm still putting together this thing. This is on DCFandom.com. They have these are all DC comics from 1987, and as you can see, what was coming out at that time, that month, you've got a couple of things. You've got Watchmen #6 at this time. First, this is the pre-crisis, Volume 2 of Wonder Woman by George Perez. That had just come out this specific month in '87. The Who's Who. That's that thing I was talking about, the Who's Who. We'll get into that later. I got to read more Warlord. But anyways, I don't want to go off on this specific thing. I'm just showing you an example. The Question. I think it's a Sienkiewicz cover. The history of DC Universe. This is all pre-crisis stuff. This is the beginning of the modern age. I thought they had, I know one of these months, they still weren't done with the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight was still going at the time. So, this is February. So by the time I get this book, let's say it's September, October, November, somewhere in there of '87, most of that stuff has come out, and it became game changers for everything, and it really ushered in the modern comic book age. The Bronze Age was over, and so books like this, touched on all that stuff. And this is '87's when I started going to conventions for the first time. I really started to get into this stuff pretty heavily and learning all the nuts and bolts and learning all the stuff. Outside of, I wasn't paying attention to the history as much. There were things of the past that I still kind of liked. I did not like Jack Kirby at this time. I really thought his art was very off-putting. I still like my John Buscema. I really liked his art, even though he kind of had that of the old. I still like stuff from the 70s. I like the Warren stuff. it was a time, the times were a-changing for me, and this is right about the time I started to really get buckled down and get serious with stuff, much to the detriment of my high school grades, because I paid more attention to this stuff than I paid attention to my schoolwork. And because, I remember even going down to see a career counselor, and they had a career counseling room, and they put you on these Amiga computers, which are new at the time, which are touch screen, which was like alien technology back then. And you had to, go through and see what you'd be good at. And anytime I take one of these tests and talk to these people, everything keeps coming up. Commercial artist, graphic designer. What are those? I didn't know what those were. I asked the art teacher, Mrs. Weaver, well, what are those? Oh, well, graphic design. She got to talk down to you with her glasses at her nose. Oh, well. And she's like 2 feet tall, so she's got to do that and look up at you at the same time. And she's like, oh, well, graphic design. We're teaching graphic designs, how to make, package designs and layouts for magazines, blah, blah, blah stuff. And I'm just like, all right, sounds boring. What's commercial art? Well, anything that's commercial. Great. I'm assuming comic books are commercial since they're selling them, right? Yeah. And then, of course, my other art teacher, Mr. Dodson. I'll get into Mr. Dodson as time. I butt heads a lot with a lot of my teachers, too. Not only did I suck at schoolwork, I also disagreed with most of my teachers. I fought them all the time on everything they said. Because I was a dumb, stupid teenage kid that knew everything, So, anyways, I digress. What are we on time? We're getting up there. So, comics around the world. So, yeah, it started to introduce me to heavy metal, and I really didn't make a full deep dive into, say, like, these type of comics. Everybody started buying, like, Airtight Garage from Moebius. Moebius was popular right around this time, at, a couple of years in. I started to become aware of these things, but I really didn't do a deep dive into European comics, I want to say, until the early 90s, when I kind of abandoned Marvel and DC. And then I started to get heavy into that. I'll do a whole episode on my inspirations of that. It definitely has a lot of influence on the type of comics that I do. But yeah, they talk about all these guys. They talk about, they start talking about anime. There's another 10-part episode right there. Is anime at this time was starting to, we had Robotech. We were aware of the things that were coming from Japan, but we really didn't understand a lot of it, and then we didn't see a lot of it. But right around the mid to late 80s, movies like Akira, or Akira, is how it's pronounced, came out in 88. We just started going to Tora Tuesday, which is this comic book shop down in 9 Mile in Ferndale, fashionable Ferndale, in just right outside of Detroit, literally a mile outside of Detroit, and they would play animes. It's raw, not subtitled, they would get these raw anime in from this guy who kept going over to Japan and getting the tapes. And then they had the Michigan Anime Club, which wasn't called that. It was called the Michigan Animation Society or something, or club. Because nobody really used the word anime back then. They just called it Japanese animation, or animation from Japan. I just called them Japanese cartoons, because and this book talks about sequential art. I really dislike the pretense people started to use to describe this stuff. I understand it, but it kind of just annoyed me when people started calling comics sequential art. It kind of annoyed me, when the people had to call it anime and they couldn't call it, or animation, animated shows, because they still have the stigma that they're for children, so they thought they could elevate themselves and show how highbrow they are by not calling it cartoons, right? It's cartoons, that's what I call them. I didn't care what people thought, I didn't care. I definitely wasn't a highbrow person, so I could care less about being highbrow. I just wasn't pretentious. It was just me. I just did what I wanted to do. I've done some pretentious things in my day, sure, but I wasn't actively trying to think I'm my shit doesn't stink. So today's a rant day. Jeez, I'm just all irritated. I need some food or something. But anyways, So it goes into equipment. Now, for the most part on the equipment, I really like this, and a lot of the stuff we had, like specifically had these erasers, and we sought out this stuff at art supply stores. But one thing I noticed about art supply stores right off the bat, especially Green's Art Supply downtown Rochester, is how freaking expensive they were. This stuff is not cheap, and you're a high school student, getting some of this stuff, I remember these O-ring, these Rotring pens, rapidographs that Mr. Spitzer, when I was at West in second semester, 7th grade, he had one, and he was talking about it and how great they would be for doing comic books and stuff. And of course, they talk about in his book how not good they are for doing comic books. They're great for, drawing, doing technical drawings. They're drawing like the panels or doing some of the perspective work. But for figure drawing, these things are useless. And they talk about using the brush all the time. And I wanted to, again, I was terrible with the brush. I was terrible with the dip pens. I had this exact pen. I used to get these for $1.19, this specific pen. Can't remember what it's called, this yellow one. And I used to use that a lot. And of course, these weren't permanent, so they would fade, and they would, you don't go anywhere near water. I remember I got out of the shower once, and I went back to my drawing board. This was in high school. And I looked down, and a drop of water hit the bristle board. Woo! Just bled like crazy. Just smeared. I was irritated. So, you want to use, if you're going to do traditional work, you always want to have permanent ink. If it's not dip pen, if it's still some kind of, pen, like a micron. Microns are permanent. They're waterproof. All the Copic pens are waterproof, so you're pretty much safe with that stuff. But that stuff didn't exist when I was young. That stuff came out later. They talk about the basic elements. The Marvel book talks on this too, about the basic elements. What's a frame, what's a low. I mean, they go into their. Is it here? They do go into talking about. That's for the figure. Where was it? The different angles, like worm's eye view or low angle, or high, bird's eye, or sorry, worm's eye view, bird's eye view, the angles and stuff. They go into that pretty good here. So just more information on the same stuff I kind of already knew from the other book. They always talk about, and they talk about this also in, if you can see this, in the other book, the Marvel book, is when you do a comic book panel is a picture cut in time. So let's say this character, this buffoon, big Batman-looking guy, kind of looks like me now, is running, and he trips and falls. Right, the best poses to use would be this one and this one. That's why they inked them. Because they're the most dynamic and they're the most expressive of that. It's just like that one punch. The wind-up, way back punch, he's going to punch somebody. So, you want that arm way back, that fist cocked and ready to go. And then you want that follow-through where it's all the way, so you get the action line. And the whole weight of the person is swung. Just that middle, like, you don't want this because it's not going to translate to a still photograph. It's going to look like somebody's just going like, hey, kiddo, but, way back here, way down here. So that's kind of what they talk about this. They just use a different example. Instead of fighting, they just show them running and tripping. I understood that, I mean, that was something that registered in my brain when I was a kid. I just love the drawings in these two. I just liked even looking at the inky. I mean, like I said, I just get lost just looking at the art. They go into perspective. Again, it didn't make three-point perspective any easier for me. It probably even compounded my confusion on it. But they also talk about, like in rooms, trying to make drama. When you got Dave Sim talks about this in that video. He's the last one in the video. And, you got two guys talking in the room. Until there's a fist fight or until there's action, you pretty much just have two people in a room talking. I mean, could have three, could have four, whatever. But, you want to be able to make a conversation between two people talking in a room as dramatic as possible. And they talk about looking at, like film noir, stuff like that, which I vaguely knew what that was back then. Speaking of noir lighting, also is a way to really increase high drama. And that's what this whole section is on lighting. They go into the different ways to light the face, you know, from one side to 2-point lighting. I think what's his face? Wally Wood is I mean it's a classic cinema thing. It's also a stage thing where they would light, you know, they'd have 2 spotlights on the people on stage. Wally Wood was the one that said, oh, he'd start doing that in comics. I assume that's true. I don't know. I mean, that's what they say, you know. And I like Wally Wood, so hey, I'll give him the credit. But yeah, so they go into all that stuff. They talk about comic book covers. A good section in here. So unless you are working traditionally, that equipment part, that you don't need that information if you're going to work 100% digitally. Like I said, I converted 10 years ago to working 100% digital, and I'm not going back, especially when the cost of everything. So they start talking. This is funny. I was at the Brother. I think it was a Brother word processor. I totally wanted the Brother word processor. It was in a catalog. It was in the J.C. Penney's catalog. A typewriter, you know, writing stuff on notebook paper. But the story and all the stuff they talk about in here about the story is pertinent information today. You know, and I agree with pretty much everything the guy says. I mean, he nails it right on the head. You know, he gives lots of examples. He talks about, I think, you know, I still want to do this for all my clients. One of these days, I'm gonna, you know, until I write my own, I think I need to start directing a lot of my clients who are writing scripts for me to illustrate. I'm going to direct them to this because there's a lot of things that just standards of comic book scripting and the way things are done right that not a lot of people are either aware of, which is fine. You know, I don't expect everybody to be a pro, but I would like to help them get better themselves, because if they start getting better at writing me scripts, they're going to get better artwork from me, and therefore, you know, they're going to be able to do, you know, whatever they're doing with my art, whether it's selling it or their own private collection, they're going to have better stuff, you know, because, you know, like I said, writing is not easy, and I think that's probably one of the problems with modern comic books is, you know, you're getting a lot of people that think they can write or have written things or are somewhat competent at writing, but maybe not writing comic books. They might be competent at writing prose. They might be competent at writing essays. You might have a competency, you know, a college graduate, you know, or even an English major might have a competency in, you know, literature and know everything about literature and, you know, be able to talk circles around any comic book writer on, you know, about Faulkner and whatever. You know, I'm just trying to think of famous writers. But anyways, but does he know how to write a comic book? Because that's a specific tool or talent that you have to have. And it doesn't matter how many PhDs you have in English or, you know, or whatever, or how many books you've written on, you know, architecture from Siberia, you know. It doesn't matter. Do you know how to write a comic book? Because there's a specific thing you have to adhere to. And I don't get it right all the time. When I write my own stuff, I have to constantly go, it's not going to work. That's not how you do that. You know, I have to, and I like reading this chapter over and over again, or chapters like it, just so I can burn into my brain some of the stuff. I mean, some people call that dogma. You know, it's like, oh, it's just, you know, comic book dogma. Yeah, it is. That's why comic books are done a certain way. So call it dogmatic. That's what you got to do. So I got to digress. I'm my blood pressure trying to come down. So yeah, and then it goes into stuff about lettering, about words on a page, words in a panel, how many word count to put in a panel. You know, it talks about structure of a story. It talks about gag comics and how there's a build-up, you know, it's a punchline, yada yada. They talk, and they give this ongoing example called The Boxer, which is like supposed to illustrate all of their points. I just like the artwork. When I was a kid, I was just like, oh, I really like that artwork. Scripts. Again, I try to give my clients a template of what I accept as a script, because you know, if I like the idea or I like working with the client, I don't mind accepting prose. I don't really like it though, because then I have to do this, and that just creates more work. And if I'm not getting paid to do this, I don't care to do so. I'd rather them do this first. So, again, this would be a great chapter in this book. I need to scan this in sometime, so I'll give it to people. You know, I'm not going to sell it, but I'm just going to give it to people. Say, okay, well, here's how this is the best. Read this. It's going to help you write better scripts, and you're going to learn how to format the scripts correctly. So when I get the script, I don't have to do any extra work. I can just go right to work and just start working on it. Breakdowns, how to break down a page. You know, they talk about doing it on scratch paper. I try not to create any more work for myself than has to be, so I start breaking down right on the page. But I do things digitally, so I can copy, paste, move. I make it do anything to move around my pages, and I do. I mean, I'm always working on. I'm starting to get into more radical panel layouts and stuff, and not just do the standard, you know, 6-panel grids. You know, I still kind of work on the 6-panel grid. I'm just trying to morph it a little bit, make it a little more interesting. And it all depends on the script, or it depends on the story. If it calls for that, yeah, sure. But right now, current one I'm working on for my syndicated strip that I do on Patreon, I really like using the way I'm doing it, kind of moving around the panels and stuff. And that's the talk about doing the breakdowns on that. Like I said, I don't want to do a how to draw comics, or, you know, the me way, or, I mean, I can, but the thing is, I'm just hoping you guys, if you're interested in this stuff, ask me questions, or if you pick up on the stuff that I'm saying, if it interests you, you know, because I the first one to admit, I am a terrible teacher. You know, this is why I never went into teaching, because I realized how bad I was at it. I can't teach people things. I just assume they know what I'm talking about, and when I have to explain something that makes perfect sense in my head, and I'm trying to explain it to somebody else, I can't do it most of the time. It's just like, just do this, you know, or just give it to me. And my son has it all the time. I try to teach my son how to do something, and he's not doing it right, and I just have to push him to the side and do it for him, because I can't explain how to do it. So, like I said, that's why I don't do tutorials. That's why I don't do a how to draw comics. You know, I don't think I could. I'd have to, if I ever wrote a book like this, it would have to undergo so much editing to make sense, because I would go off on tangents. You know, as you just notice I do all the time. I go on tangents. You know, and there's too much in my head, and I can't get it out. So I have a hard enough trying to get out what I want to do on paper when I do my own comic strips. So we got that. All right, where are we at? We're on time. Let's try to wrap it up here in the next 10 minutes. Some Neil Adams Batman in there, Man-Bat. That's pretty cool. That is Man-Bat, right? Yeah. And he goes into a little tirade thing. I met Neil a couple of times and talked to him briefly, not long conversations, but just said a few things to him. But he's got a pretty good spot in that video, and he talks about, you know, breaking the template and being more, you know, expressive with the panels. And I'm starting to do that more myself now. I don't want to get too crazy with it, just because you know, I'm kind of used to a certain look and feel, and they're talking about breaking down those pages. This is all that scripting. All the pages that are turned like this are talking about that little sample comic, The Boxer. They get into stuff on penciling. Again, if you're working traditionally, makes sense. However, even if you're working digitally, there's still certain things that you should read about, you should know about. I think a problem today is with digital technology, and a lot of people are growing up, you know, where they don't ever know a world without digital technology. Some of this stuff is being lost, and, you know, if you don't know how to draw with a real pencil and paper, and the only thing you've ever drawn is on a, you know, not even just drawing on a Intuos, you know, where you have to draw and look at the screen. You're drawing on, you know, a $2,000 piece of machinery, you know, that you're drawing right on the screen. It's hypersensitive, right? Your artwork's gonna suffer, and it's gonna look a certain way because you don't know how to draw with a pencil first. So this is good information to have, even though you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt if you don't use, you know, you just don't pay attention to stuff where they're talking about the paper tooth and stuff like that, because it's meaningless to you at that point. But you should still know that. You should still know that different surfaces give you a different look. There we go. There's the guy. I told you. So yeah, drawing with the side of the pencil, that's something I started to do. I didn't start drawing until like my mid to late 20s. I started drawing with the side of the pencil. I was always, drawing with that hard, pencil. I started drawing with the side, started learning different things, how to draw texture, and then try to translate that texture into ink, and art all into itself. That's why inkers are usually artists first before they're inkers. Let's see, what's it going to here? It talks about characters and giving characters life. I could go into that, a whole spiel on that. That I might be able to explain somewhat well. I won't do it here, but rendering real life things. Here's one thing that's kind of interesting. Is like Jack Kirby was notorious for this, and a lot of those old school comic book masters, their stuff was great, and they created the vocabulary for what was, what is the comic book. A lot of them couldn't draw cars, so a lot of them had to go out and take photographs of cars out on the street, guns. If their comics are heavy on guns, to be able to draw a gun, and not just a gun from the side, because anybody can do that for the most. Well, not anybody, but I mean, drawing the gun from the side is fine, but drawing the gun from an angle, 3/4 view, straight on, up, worm's eye, bird's eye, being able to draw these objects from different angles takes work to master, and so they kind of go into that about talking about drawing, non-figure things. They're starting to pencil that page of the boxer. I've stared at that boxer page for a lot of times, and there's a lot of stuff I still pick up today on it. It goes into inking. Again, good to know. I would read it. I would learn it. If you've never inked before, I would start trying to ink with traditional equipment. Even if you're going to go Micron and Copic, that's fine. Just, I would definitely try to get used to that drawing with that brush, or inking with that brush. Don't just make everybody have, technical pens on everything. Learning the different sizes of the pens, being able to roll the pen. And a pen it's really good to learn to use is any chisel tip. So if it's a calligraphy pen, a fountain pen, anything that has a chisel tip, just a straight line, it's about, yay big, about maybe 1/8 of an inch, or maybe 1/16 of an inch. Learn to draw, because when you go sideways, you get a thin line. When you pull back or go forward, try not to do that, because you'll splatter ink. But if you pull back, you'll get a thicker line, right? And you can. A brush is better, because a brush you can roll to get that thick and thin. The chisel tip's a little bit more. It's a little more dramatic of a transition, but you can do it with those type of pens. So get used to that stuff. And then if you're going to do 100% digital, try to find tools. Whether you're using Photoshop, you're using Sketchbook Pro, you're using Clip Paint, whatever the application you're using, try to really explore the tools in there and find the tools that work for you the best. Because there's a lot of tools. I mean, they've got tools that emulate this real life stuff. Lots of them. I still, you gotta break out of my comfort zone and use more textured brushes and stuff, or textured tools, not just brushes, but textured stuff too, which I do. I knew this was gonna go on. My videos are starting to get longer and longer because there's just a lot of information to cover. Feathering and cross hatching. That's a big thing. I'm getting better at feathering, and I've spent my whole life trying to feather. I don't cross hatch as much. In fact, I don't think I cross hatch much at all. Little spots here and there to find some of my cross hatching, but most of the time I'm feathering my lines. Whether it's especially on superheroes and costumes and stuff. You're trying to draw these sleek costumes and stuff. Feathering is the way to go. And they don't give you like a how-to feather, but they just mention the different types of techniques. Balancing your blacks, that's a big thing. You can look at a page and you go, wow, got so many blacks up here, and this is so empty and open down here. You want to balance your blacks. That's, like I said, that's a whole chapter in and of itself that they could write on balancing blacks, if not a whole book on just balancing blacks. It's a tricky thing to do. Then they go into lettering. I letter everything digitally, by typing it. I get fonts. I use Wild Words as my main font, but I'll use other fonts too as well to letter my work. They talk about how to letter traditionally and using lettering tools like that stylograph or what that thing's called. I never really used one. There's one there. Yeah, stylograph. I never used one, but that's what the pros would use. So, yeah, word balloons or sound effects. People have different names for them. I just call them SFX, sound effects. That's what I usually denote when in a script, to say it's an SFX. And usually put it after, you put a captions first, dialogue, then sound effects, just because I'm used to that order. I'm not speaking to you specifically, I'm just saying if you're writing a script, that's how I like to see it. If you come right off the bat with the sound effects, I'm just going to assume that that's the most important thing on the page, and then I'm going to make it really big. But if that's the case, just denote little parentheses. Really focus on the sound effect, make it big, fill up most of the panel, something like that. And then, of course, they get into getting started and how to build a portfolio, the do's and don'ts, a lot of anecdotes of real-world situations, going to make an appointment with an editor and stuff. If you are going to work for a publisher, you've got to know this stuff, and you've got to go through that avenue. Me personally, I can get on another video on this, is I avoided, for the most part, my whole life trying to work for a publisher, because I've been turned down plenty of times, and I think the way to go is I think Dave Sim was right, back in the day, or the Eastman and Laird, and they made their own studio, self-publish, and they do go into that. There's a whole section on self-publishing here, and they talk about self-publishing. It's not super expansive. They talk a lot about color separations, which, if you're working digitally, and they don't do color separations anymore, but if you want to know that, go into that. But they talk about self-publishing, and that's pretty much how the book ends. They give some important which I'm assuming these addresses are probably changed. They've got like Marvel, DC's address in there. Eclipse Comics, Fantagraphics in California. First Comics. It's funny, you notice everything's either in New York or in Los Angeles. It's how everything is, not just comics. The two big hubs of the United States, California and Los Angeles. But there are stuff in between, like Capital City Distributors is out of Wisconsin. Gladstone Publishing's out of Scottsdale. Kitchen Sinks in Wisconsin. There's even Styx Comic Service in Manitoba, Winnipeg, or Winnipeg, Manitoba, in Canada. But yeah, and then they talk about there's British addresses in the United Kingdom. I think it's IPC Magazine does 2000 AD, which is where all those guys, like Alan Moore and all those guys came from. They talk about syndicates, and then they give you a lot of information that if you're not familiar with, is good to know. So I highly recommend this book. You can get it on Thrift Books. I'm sure you can find it on eBay. It's out of print. I don't believe it's currently in print. This is not my original. I had an original 87 of it because that's when I got it. This one I think is probably a third or fourth printing. Let's see, when was this one printed? This one was printed in... Okay, it was reprinted in 1991, oddly enough, the year I graduated high school, and it was also reprinted in 1993, oddly enough, 30 years ago when I met some friends. But anyways, this is the third printing of it. It's been printed. It was reprinted in 91, reprinted in 1993, and I don't know. I mean, it could still be in print, or maybe it was printed 5 years ago. I don't know. I haven't really gone a deep dive into that, but it's called. It's got a long title, How to Draw and Sell Comic Strips for Newspapers and Comic Books. And it's written by a guy named Alan McKenzie. Let's see his name. Alan McKenzie. And I'll try to put this information in the description. But, yeah, check it out. Huge influence on my life. So... Going forward, I think I'm going to probably, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I might get back into comics, and we'll do some X-Men Fall of the Mutants. Let's do the Fall of the Mutants episode. That'll be pretty cool. I don't think it'll be a two-parter. It might be an hour-long episode, but it shouldn't be a two-parter. I think I can wrap it up in that. I haven't read it recently in a while. I should go back and read it again, but I've got some stuff to do, so I'm going to have to go on memory. I read it about a year ago, I think, again. Yeah, so we'll do that, and then so this week we'll kick this one off. We'll do more comic stuff. I don't have anything pre-ordered. I believe that's coming in the mail. I did order a Thrift Books finally started to get those first comics of the Ninja Turtles. Colorizations came in, and they had a really good price on issue 3. I think they had 3 and 2. 2 is still kind of pricey, but 3 was good. It was a good copy, so I picked that up. That should be here. I'll probably show that more and go into that one more as well. I really haven't touched on the Ninja Turtles original black and white comic much either, so I might be doing this all backwards, but eventually I'll try to cover everything. So, alright, we're almost at an hour here, 55 minutes, so let's cut it there, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.